It's been a very interesting time these last couple of months, and I know a lot of the talks that I've been giving have stirred up a lot of things in people, especially the amount of focus I've given to what we'll call the dark side. And when I was talking at the conference in North Carolina, after I gave my talk, people came up to me and said, "I know a good psychiatrist for you. I have a great acupuncturist. It's going to be okay, Bruce." And this is all fine and very sweet, honestly, but what's going on doesn't require medical attention. It really is process. It's very much process that may be universal. And the reason I'm sharing it with everybody is because there may be some people who will be helped by what I'm talking about in the journey towards self, or the journey toward awakening. I think I've talked about this quite a bit, this idea that so many of us reaching for light in our lives are really doing it because we're terrified of the darkness. And we don't want to admit that to ourselves, so we just create these spiritual personas that deny darkness, or deny the creatures that exist in the darkness, and tell ourselves that they're just not real. But what I've discovered for myself is that really what I did is I kind of locked them in the basement and closed the door and basically said, I don't have to deal with you. You don't exist. But as you get older, or more specifically, as you begin to arrive at greater levels of clarity and awakening, one of the things you awaken to is that there's something in the basement. And it's not quiet anymore. It's starting to bang on the door. And it usually does it most in the middle of the night when you're sound asleep. It just starts to make itself known, and you wake up in a kind of a white horror, a sweat, an awareness of something there that is in a way unnameable, and you don't want to deal with it. And it can send you into hyperventilation, high blood pressure. It can do all sorts of things. I've told you, and I've repeated this story now somewhat frequently, about this thing getting out of the closet, and my approach to it was to sing "Hello Darkness, My Old Friend," which seemed to be unbelievably helpful to me. And now what seems to be taking place, now that this thing is out of the closet, is it's decided to move in. And it's now part of my daily life. It's in the house, it has breakfast with me every morning, we go for walks together. And I'm not terribly enamored of this part of my existence, but I have to tell you it's part of my existence. And I suspect it's not just part of my existence. I think it's part of all of our existence. The thing we most lock away, the thing we most are afraid of in ourselves, the thing we are most shamed by, whatever that is you. And if you're opening to accept and love and be yourself, you can't do it in denial of a whole big portion of who you are. It's really quite fascinating, this journey, and I'm getting these emails now and calls from people who are all saying thank you for talking about it, because it does reflect something real in some people's journey, and I think that's meaningful. And I will tell you this from my own experience, that the very thing you're running from is the thing you have to run toward. The very thing that you're most afraid of is the very thing you have to accept most deeply in yourself, at the varying levels that it occurs. And that a spiritual life that you're living to try to escape is going to only bring you into confrontation. Because you can't escape yourself. You cannot escape the totality of self. It's just not possible. And the journey to that starts out in a kind of blind reaching for goodness, kindness, light, harmony, peace, all of these things that we think we want and that we want to have as a kind of antidote to the part of ourselves we don't like. But the journey, I think, will always lead into learning to love the totality of the stuff you are, which is the stuff you like and don't like. And the stuff you like may not reveal itself in quite the same way, or the stuff you don't like may not reveal itself in the same way for everybody. And I had someone write to me recently a rather beautiful email about how their journey was not away from darkness, but a terror of tenderness or love. And I find that very important, because everybody's fear is not the same as other people's fear. What traumatizes us is our own personal construct. And we all have to find our way in this spiritual unfolding through all of the parts and elements of what we are. And, you know, Rudy said early on to me, and I've repeated it, and he said it to many of you, this is a life's work. You can't do this in a week or a month. You can't do it. And unfortunately, and I've talked about this quite a bit, many people who've avoided this process get to face the entirety of it in the last minutes of their life. I don't recommend that. Based on what I have experienced in this lifelong journey, I don't know how somebody can pull this off in a few days or a few minutes or a few hours, or in some cases a few seconds. I don't know how you do it. It has to be so totally shattering on so many levels. And I do recommend for anybody who wants to know themselves, who wants to unfold, who wants to face the truth of their existence, this process, the meditation process, is a gentle version. And even in its gentleness, it can be pretty brutal. And I'll tell you why it can be brutal. It can be brutal because life is brutal. Rudy talked about that a lot. He said it specifically. He said life is brutal. And anyone who's been around long enough knows that to be true. And learning to let that in and embrace it is really an important ingredient here. And I think if you try to deny the brutality of life, or you try to wish it away, you will find yourself in a state of great frustration. Somehow we have to open our eyes to totality. We have to open our eyes to what is. And we have to figure out what is. What is? What's going on here? And the answers that may come to you may be quite a bit different than what you're expecting. And I felt very somewhat obliged to talk about it today, even though what I'm going to talk about is a little bit conceptual and may not ring very true to you. I keep remembering, I've talked about this, but you know, A Few Good Men, and Tom Cruise saying, I want the truth, and Jack Nicholson saying, you can't handle the truth. And sort of what I'm going to describe as something perhaps you can't handle either. None of us handle it very easily. But it's really interesting as one digs deeper and deeper into self and into what is going on, is to discover that it's quite a bit different than what we're imagining it to be. And I'm not going to tell you this as the truth, because I'm not sure I can present the truth, but I can present a version of it that might just jog your mind in a certain way to make you look at life a little bit differently. I was sitting with Blanche the other day in New York City in a restaurant in which I was looking out at the street. And Blanche was across from me in this big plate glass window. And I'm sitting there in a state of increasing stillness. And I started getting a little nauseous. And I felt every time a bus went by, or a car, that it was driving right through me. That it was moving through my body, but my body wasn't this body, it was the body of everything I was seeing. And that all the people walking by were walking through what I am. And I also sensed that I know these people, that they've been walking through me forever. It's the same cast of characters wearing different clothes, different hats, different blouses, putting on different wigs. It's like the same people always walking by. New York City's got about 300 of them, and they just keep circling around, and you keep passing the same people forever, and you think they're different, but they're not different. And I started just talking to Blanche about what was being realized in the moment, or experienced in the moment. And the experience is very real to me, and it's something that we talk about in that group in North Carolina, those who have awakened, which is the experience that there is nothing but this moment. Now, I've said that 1,000 times. There's nothing but this. This is it. This is all there is. There is nothing else but this, and this is it. But to truly understand that is to begin to realize that there is no past and there is no future. The entire past that you relate to in yourself arises spontaneously in this moment. It arises fully born. This self that you think you are at this moment has never been before and never will be again. It will exist and does exist only as it arises now. And if someone says, well, I was born in 1943, or I've got all this stuff to do next week, none of that exists in this moment. The only thing that exists is a thing telling you, I had a life before this, and I will have a life after this. But it's not necessarily true. I would say it's not true, but you have to figure this out for yourself. The way you would prove it to yourself is that you will say, I remember this past life. I remember what happened yesterday. I remember what happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But what you are remembering is something that is arising in this moment. It's impacting this moment. But it's only there as a memory content. It's there as an idea arising spontaneously now. And what is occurring is everything that is occurring is this spontaneous this. And there is no other truth but this. And I can look at all of you and I can say, well, I knew George when we were young kids, and we did drugs together back in the 60s. Well, what is the 60s? What is that? It's an idea of a time that was. It is a mental construct. How would I prove it to myself? Well, I could go maybe to a drawer full of photographs if I had them, and I could pull them out, but those photographs are arriving in this moment. They're part of this very second. They're not a real proof. They're just a proof that in this second there are photographs that have this idea that we existed so many years before. Birth certificate, driver's license. We can talk about the world outside. What is the world outside? We can talk about Libya, okay? And all the horrors that are happening and Gaddafi being killed. How do we know that's true? Well, there's a television that's a little screen in this moment that has all of this stuff blasting at us, and we're going, oh, really, Gaddafi did this and that happened? Oh my God, that's terrible. It's just something coming from a screen in a window that's right now. The newspaper arrives at the door. Where does it arrive? It arrives in our consciousness. Words appear that we absorb and we start to have huge emotional reaction to. Emails arrive, telephone calls, Skype. And we go, well, this proves there's a world out there. But I knew on my LSD trip in the 60s, I was trying to call my parents. I was on Bank Street in New York, and my parents were in Detroit. And I walked to a phone booth, and I picked up the phone, and I was going to try to dial my parents to prove that they existed. And then I knew at that moment I'd only be hearing my own voice, and it would be called my parents. That they did not exist, that Saul Steinberg drawing of the whole of the America ending at the Hudson River and America being this vague thing out there, that's all it was. It's a brain concept. The world, everything that you think is a concept of something. The truth is, and I can't even get to the total truth of it at this talk, but I can just say it's this, now. And it is happening. It is happening. Or Paul Hederman has a better version of this. He just says happening is happening. There's no it happening. Happening is happening. There's no me happening. The happening includes all of this. There's no centerpiece of you. When that bus drove through me, it wasn't driving through this body, it was driving through this, that I am. I don't know what it does to tell you this. I don't know what value it has to tell you this. It doesn't change anything. But it starts to jar the system a little bit so that you may begin to look at what is differently. Not as something that pre-existed, not as something that moves toward future, but something that simply is in some phenomenally mysterious and remarkable way. And we are that existence. This is a collective singularity. Somehow we are rising together in this room, in this moment. There's a voice speaking. I have no more idea what this voice is going to say than you do. It's just happening. It's just coming out. It's speaking to us for some reason. I suppose there's a reason. But it is alive and it is well. And it's happening. Things happen that seem really tough in our lives. Really tough. They're hard. Difficult choices. Pain. People around us suffer. People around us have a wonderful time. They're going on vacation. In our mind, we just have these people on a boat somewhere sailing, cruising in the Caribbean, and we're going, oh, they're having a wonderful trip in the Caribbean. Or we go in the Caribbean. We get on a boat and go in the Caribbean. And what happens? All of a sudden, this room morphs into an airplane on the way to a boat, and the boat morphs into a place with a lot of sun and a lot of sand and a lot of water, and we're in the Caribbean. But do we actually move anywhere? Do we go anywhere? My idea is no. We are this absolute still point. Still point. We have no size or dimension, but we are absolute stillness. And around that stillness, happening happens. When you meditate, you begin to let go of all the motion. You even let go of the emotion. You let go of the thoughts. You let go of the noise. And you have this period in the middle of a meditation of it's like you have arrived at one-pointedness, or you have arrived at stillness. You have arrived at peace. You have arrived at love or bliss. But I would describe it a little differently. You have never left that. You have never left it. What's happened is that the noise has arrived, has arisen. The world rises up. Manifestation happens within the screen of your being, of all being, and it obliterates for most of everybody this still point. And so when you work your way back, what you're doing is you're quieting the noise. You're pulling back, you're detaching, you're not engaging at all. And as you disengage, you start to fall back inward into this place that always is, always was, always will be. Yourself. And at some point, when the arising occurs again, you engage it differently. You engage it from this still point. You sit there and you become rooted in this stillness, in this clarity, in this peacefulness. And the world manifests and you are there with it. And then something happens. Everything is peaceful, and one of the old thought forms, one of the old engagement powers grabs you. Someone really beautiful walks by. You're pulled into it. A thought of your work situation at work, a money issue, jumps up, and you are completely pulled out of the still point, completely back into the drama of life. And it may take you the following week, another sitting in meditation, for you to be able to return to this point. Or you may find you can sit down in your own meditation and just return to that point. Or you may find that the world has totally gotten you again and there's nothing you can do. You're just caught. And some people are caught their entire life. They never, ever, ever find this place. But usually if your life is disturbed enough, if it's unpleasant enough, if it's difficult enough, you may begin this search. Saying, help me out of here, stop the world, I want to get off. How do I get back to, or how do I find peace? That's what we call it, peace, love, bliss. And the way you find it, there are thousands of ways. Meditation, and this practice is one of them. And you go back to that place, and you work it, and you work it, and you develop what Rudy called the muscle of detachment, the muscle of surrender. You actually have this ability to consciously let go of the very thing that's trying to grip you. The deeper you go, it's a little bit like digging in sand. You know, you have dirt, you have sand, you go a little deeper and you hit clay and then you hit rock. By the time you hit rock, it's heavy duty. It's real work. Spiritual work goes through rock. You have to keep digging deeper. And the deeper you go, the more resistance you will feel. And that resistance will become the essence of spiritual work. It's what I call brutal life. It's tough. It's tough digging through this stuff. Most people don't want to do it. According to Buddhism, you know, there can be 3 million people seeking enlightenment and one person gets it. And I totally understand why it would only be one person. Because you got to work so hard and nobody wants to do it really. And because you keep coming up against these things that get more and more difficult, or in my case, terrifying. And you go, I can't go there. I can't go there. And you stop, or you try to avoid it. And then you realize, I've been doing this thing for 40 years, or 50 years, whatever. How can I let something stop me now? How can I do that? And you finally find the courage, or the intention, the ability to say, no, I will not stop. I will go through the darkness, I will go through the fear, I will go through anything to get back to the deep, deep part of stillness. And one of the beautiful things about stillness and about oneness, or about this exquisite space within us, is it's so powerfully compelling. Once you've tasted it, once you've been near it, it's all you want. It's why I say this to you week after week. It's why you guys drive here every week, to get this precious, precious thing that is there all the time, but is so hard to gain access to. This place gives it to you. It actually presents it. And everyone who comes here gets it for a few seconds at least, some of you for the full time you're here, and some of you carry it home with you. Some of you bring it with you, but you still come and allow it to be amplified. When I went to North Carolina, as I've done for 3 years in a row, to this conference of enlightened people, the abundance of it is enormous. It's enormous. It's also abundant here. There is a direct line to stillness and openness and oneness and truth. And there are times, and I'm pretty honest about it, where my own access point gets confused, where my own journey becomes difficult. And I have realized that it's, as I've said earlier, better to share that with you than to pretend otherwise. Because if mine gets difficult and confused, yours will. We all will. We will all go through it. Better to have somebody honestly telling you what it's like than to have somebody pretending, oh, you just sit back and it's done and you're free and it's pure enlightenment and joy and bliss. That's great. But you don't get there, I don't think, without earning it in some incredibly visceral and effortful way. And that's what we're all doing. We keep talking about yin and yang, the idea that there's dark and light, and the image of dark and light in the Eastern sort of symbology is of these two equal forces in absolute harmony. And what came to me last week, and this is a very powerful idea to me, is that it's not that the image of the balance is off. It is balanced, but the darkness is vast. It's vast. And the light is that big. Yang, or whichever one it is huge, and yin is tiny. But if you can get a hold of that tiny spark of light, you will balance the darkness. It's like one star in a dark sky. It changes everything. It gives it focus. It surrounds, the sky surrounds the light. One pinpoint of light balances all of the unknown, all of the terror, all of the darkness. That little pinpoint of light is what we get to hold on to. And if you can find it right there between your fingers, if you find it in your heart, if you just reach for that place, it illuminates the darkness. And the secret in all of this is that light is inside you. That light is you. You are the light you look for. You are the light. And if you can reach in for that light, into that little spark of light, and really hold it, it becomes luminous, illuminating. It lights the darkness. It also may be, I think of it as the projector bulb, creating this entire thing around us that we call life. The thing that is happening is arising from the light within. It's arising and broadcasting outward for our entertainment, I think, for our delight, for our amazement, for our joy. It keeps us entertained in the infinite space that we are. It seems to want to arise. It seems to want to tell stories. It seems to want to take us on journeys. It seems to have this enormous need to arise. That's what's going on. It is arising because it wants to arise, or arising wants to happen. And we are totally in it. And for all of the horror and difficulty and drama and the heroics and the courage and the strength that we have to get to deal with this, we want that. We want that because it wouldn't be entertaining without it. It wouldn't be as good a ride without it. You don't want to go to a movie that's kind of like, it's okay. You want to go to a movie that's really got you by the throat and the heart. You want to watch this because it's the most engaging movie there ever was. Well, your life is the most engaging movie there ever was. Even if it's boring, even if it's really boring, every one of you has a task at hand. When I write movies, I always talk about the unwilling hero, reluctant hero. We are all reluctant heroes. None of us wants the task of the journey. Nobody wants it. But we all get the opportunity, in fact, we all get the obligation to go on this journey. And what is the journey toward? It's toward truth. It's toward awakening. It's toward oneness. It's toward this. Back to the self. And when you get back to it and you win it, it's like winning the greatest prize. It's like winning the talisman. It's like winning everything you've ever wanted in life. It's the journey back to that is the journey we celebrate. And the heroism it takes to get there. The selflessness, the incredible drama we have to go through, and the capacity we have to let go of ourselves to find the truth of this journey. That's what we're all doing. And the journey looks like it's taking place in a real world with all of these things going on. You know, the World War II, and the Oscars. You know, I mean, everything we all build as something real and meaningful. It's just happening. And we love it more than anything imaginable, except for truth. And we love truth more. And we want to get there. Every one of us wants to get there. Every one of us is reaching for that at this very second. You guys make huge efforts to come here to hear these kinds of talks. And I sit here because I want to hear them as well. We're all part of the same phenomenon. You know, there's no Bruce here talking. Bruce, I'm telling you, put Bruce alone without any connection to any of this, and I've watched what Bruce writes when Bruce tries writing. It's pretty frightening. But when you get this happening, this flow happening, it comes, and it's not Bruce, it's not anyone, it's our inner self talking to us. Using this mouth right now, but it could use your mouth, it could use anybody's mouth. And it will. I remember being at a friend's, sitting with a friend who was dying. We were all surrounding the bed. And it was kind of a moment for last words, and I was the teacher. And I felt, well, oh God, it's going to fall to me to make all the last words. And so I started talking, and then suddenly the words stopped. And I forget who was next to me. It could have been Blanche. It could have been, there were a whole bunch of us. The words moved around the room. And everyone said what had to be said, and everyone was eloquent, and everyone said something perfect. And it was so beautiful. And it was so good for me to see that this isn't the singular source of anything. It's just one source, and every one of us is the source. Every one of us is the flow. Every one of us has exactly the same capacity to speak the truth in our own terms, in our own way, through our own body, our own mind. Every one of us is brilliant and a genius if we want to be. Just enter this space and let it speak, and trust me, it will sound like everything you've ever wanted to say being spoken. You will say the right things to people, you will make the right apologies, you will ask for forgiveness and repentance, you will speak of love, you will speak of goodness, you will speak of truth, you will speak of honor, you will speak nobly to people. It's just find this space in you that is the voice of that, and let it express itself. It is truth. It's just truth. And it's very simple stuff. And we are all that stuff, every one of us. No one is separate from it. No one is other than anyone else. There is no hierarchy at all. There's just people who are more lost and people who are more found. Ultimately, we'll all be found. So, that is the truth as it is for this voice in this moment. I hope it stirs some stuff up inside each of us so that there will be more need, desire, hunger for more of it. Because I think that's what we're sharing. Any questions?
Yeah.
Wow.
The idea of darkness being so big, in your particular case, standing aside, listening and looking, makes me wonder if after 40 years of seeking the light and going into the light, that this is just a reaction, a natural balance back of 40 years of light. Now, being pulled back with a little bit of darkness.
Maybe.
And it's the same thing.
You know, whatever I'm expressing to you now is now.
Well, it was that.
And I don't have a larger picture of it. Yeah, maybe what you're saying is true, but I have no idea. I just can tell you what I'm feeling right now. That there is light and there is darkness, and this light feels, it doesn't feel very big particularly, but it feels absolute and complete. And so its size doesn't matter at all. It balances it out. So whether it's the actual equal to the darkness or not in terms of size, it is equal to it in terms of influence and power.
Thank you. That's all I can say.
You're welcome.
You seem to have deconstructed the relationship between space and time in an eloquent way that I could never put into words. And then when it comes to our feeble quality to access the past and project into the future and just conjure them up as if they exist, according to what you were saying, I understand that because I think that's a lot of what I've been experiencing. What's the difference between us here and what we experience in a dream? Because aren't we doing some of that in the dream when we're accessing all kinds of stuff?
It's very like a dream. You know, your dreams, you have these strange, inconsistent things happening, and something links them. It links them and gives them historical import. So this happened and that happened. It gives it sort of causality.
There's always a sequence
Yes,
to it.
life is the same thing.
Right.
We create causality, we create sequence, but the sequence may be no more real than in dream. All that's happening is this. You know, when I went to this play the other night, we went to see two plays which were really fascinating, but what you see sitting on a stage is really interesting. You see people in the moment, and you know nothing about them. And then they start to talk, and you start to feed in the past, and you start to build the future, and this present just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's all happening on this one stage. It's just story that's deepening and expanding in one space. That's all we are. It's a story in one space that deepens and expands every second, and it can go infinitely.
Would you call that character development?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Plot development, character development, but it's all happening in this one space and at this one moment. And that's what our lives are. We create this incredible sense for who we are. You know, I'm talking to you. You have gray hair and a gray beard. You know, there was a time you didn't have that. I never knew you at that point. You know,
I never knew
you
myself either.
Well, that's a good point. but that point,
Right.
we can acknowledge in each other existed. There was a time where you were a young boy and all of this.
Right.
But the truth of this moment is that that's only a conjecture. It's only a conjecture. There's no proof that you were a young boy. There's no proof that you didn't have gray hair. There's only this right now. And if we're looking for proof, we can find it. We can find it in this moment. We can find a thing that will tell us in this moment, yes, something happened way back when, but the truth is we're only finding something in this moment to tell us that. We don't have a body of evidence. We think we do. The mind tells us we do. It creates linkage, but the truth of this is the truth. And you can look at all the other stuff and say it was the truth, maybe, but the truth, as we live it, is right this moment. George.
So be here now is the only real reality.
It's the only real reality. That's right.
Everything else is some sort. I was just watching that movie, Life in the Material World, Living in the,
Right.
George Harrison story. And it's just an amazing story when you really look at all the things that Sarkis put together. But, you know, when he was attacked, you know, it's that's like the darkness coming
Absolutely.
right at you from nowhere.
That's exactly. And it does exactly that.
Mhm.
You know, and that darkness is what we locked in the basement. Trust me, that's what it is.
I saw a great bumper sticker last night. Just exactly what you said. And you know how you see bumper sticker, I'd rather be this, I'd rather be that. The bumper sticker said, I'd rather be here now.
No. Great.
What about all our artifacts and our accoutrements? Do we use it to define a physical self that doesn't exist?
No, it exists to define the self that exists right now. but you can give it weight, you can give it history. You know, I have photographs that go back, to when I was a little boy, and I can go, well, there's Bruce, there's all that stuff. But it's just photographs. And, I mean, look, life is the aggregate of all of this stuff, but the only thing that's really happening is this.
But do we aggregate all that stuff just to define ourselves, which
I-
then we are ephemeral?
Yes,
You know,
we're very ephemeral. That's all we are, is ephemeral. We're this thing that's happening, and we're not even this thing. It's happening, or happening is happening. What is that? What is happening that's happening? It's this. And we call it life, and we give it dimensionality, and you have scientists who peer into the molecules of things and into the stars and give us a length and time and age. What are they looking into? They're not looking into anything but this. It has infinite capacity in every direction, but it's only this. It's ageless and it's timeless in the best sense of the word. There is no age and there's no time. It's just this. Knowing this now doesn't help a lot, because it's still the same thing we've been in. But it may just do that to your head and help you start to look at this a little bit differently, which would be good. I think good. At least it's good in terms of what we're talking about here. Anyone else? Okay, that's it for now.